Welcome, councillors, to our 6th of April Ordinary Council meeting. I'd like to open the meeting and start with a prayer. Almighty God, be with us as we work for the people of the Shire of Moorabool. Grant us wisdom that we may care for the Shire as true stewards of your creation. You may be aware of the great responsibilities placed upon us. Help us to be just in all our dealings, and may our work prosper for the good of all. Amen. I'd now like to read the Acknowledgement of Country. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. As in accordance with Council's governance rules, this meeting will be live streamed and also recorded for accuracy of minutes. We have the only councillor who is not with us either in person or online is Councillor Edwards at this point in time. I'm sure he'll be along very shortly, so we'll just sort of leave it at that. Just confirmation of the minutes of the 2nd of March meeting, councillors. Somebody prepared to move that. Councillor Dudley, Councillor Minari. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Councillors, are there any disclosure of conflict of interest on the matters on tonight's paper? Yes, Councillor Tatchell, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I notice that my nearest and dearest is a speaker to an item, so I'd probably best not be in the same room, is it?
No, we'll just, when that time comes, that's item 13.1, councillor.
Situation normal in my family.
Yeah, so if you could just sort of, we'll note that. Any other conflicts of interest, councillors? Thank you. Public question time. We have a number of questions that have been forwarded by constituents. The first one was Mr John Kowalski, and Mr Jeffrey, would you wish to read out the question, please, and the response from council, please?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. There's two questions from Mr Kowalski, and I'll read them both.
Certainly.
With the response. Question 1 is, can council please advise the date and what the traffic safety audit undertaken at the intersection of Mill Park Drive and Blackwood Road, Bland, recommended? And the response is, a road safety audit was undertaken in December 2020 by an independent accredited contractor following completion of the master plan for the Mill Park Reserve. The key points raised in the audit were sight distance improvements at the intersection, sighting of the pedestrian access and signage and speed limit considerations. Question 2, can council please advise of its plans, if any, to improve safety for vehicles, cyclists and pedestrians using the Mill Park swimming pool and recreational area via Blackwood Road, Bland? And the response is, as part of the response to the road safety audit undertaken at the site, council is proposing the following measures. Number 1, improvements to sight distance at the intersection through vegetation management, some of which require approval prior to implementation. Number 2, construction of a new separate pedestrian connection to the park, incorporating a revised location based on the safety audit. And number 3, making application to Department of Transport for a speed reduction at this location. I also note that correspondence has been received from Mr Kowalski in relation to this and has also been responded to.
Thank you, Mr Jeffrey. Any comments or questions, councillors, on the response, the question or response from Mr Kowalski? And as with council's process, these responses will be forwarded back through to Mr Kowalski. Thank you, Mr Jeffrey. We have a couple of questions also from Mr David Marnie of Parwin, and I think Mr Bazudenhout is in his area, and we'll read the question and respond, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The question is from Mr David Marnie in Parwin. Will council seek an urgent meeting with relevant state government ministers to have the Woolpack Road option considered as a Bogasmaas East Link route? In response, it is the understanding of council officers that the Woolpack option has been considered for the Bogasmaas East Link Road project. Council officers will, however, follow up on Mr Marnie's request.
Thank you, Mr Bazudenhout. And there was another question, I understand, from Mr Marnie as well, please.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll respond to that one.
Yes.
So the question is, will council seek an urgent meeting with relevant state government ministers to request urgent funding to commence solving Bogasmaas Township traffic congestion and report back on the outcome. The response is, over a long period, Council has been working on traffic improvements around Bacchus Marsh. This has been informed by the Bacchus Marsh Integrated Transport Strategy that has successfully implemented and advocated for a number of projects in recent years, including but not limited to the Hallets Way O'Leary Way Southern Extension, Hallets Way Northern Extension, Melbourne-bound freeway ramps and pedestrian overpass at Hallets Way, Gisborne Road Western Freeway intersection upgrade, Main Street Gisborne Road traffic signals, the Eastern Link Road corridor planning study, and construction of the Aqualink cycle corridor. Whilst there's no single solution for traffic improvement outcomes for Bacchus Marsh, Council will continue to implement and advocate for traffic improvement projects for the town, particularly with future residential growth areas being planned. And then in conjunction with the first question relating to Eastern Link Road project, officers would be happy to write to the relevant ministers seeking ongoing support for traffic improvements and seeking a meeting to discuss the issues.
Thank you, Mr Jeffrey. Any questions or comments on that question for Mr Mann in the response? And again, though, those responses will be forwarded back through to Mr Marnie. Thank you.
Yeah, just one if I may, Mr Mayor, sorry.
Yes, Councillor Edwards. Yes, please. Glad to hear.
Just in relation to, I think the questions around the options that have come forth, and I know Council hasn't received a preferred option yet, but has Council written previously to either Minister or Regional Roads Victoria in relation to the reason why Woolpack Road was removed?
Mr Jeffrey, you able to respond to that, or Mr CEO, please? Mr Bazoodenhout, sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, I may need to clarify this further, but we had conversations and we had written correspondence with Regional Roads Victoria, which we dealt with through the technical working group. So in that forum, we have requested clarification and we had written correspondence, but I'll have to take on notice whether we actually wrote to the Minister himself.
Thank you, Mr Bazoodenhout. Councillor Edwards, did you hear that response, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, well, as I said, those responses to those questions will be sent out to both the petitioners. Next item of business is item 11.1. We do have 3 speakers to this particular matter, so normal procedure, we will hear those speakers first. And the first one is Mr Edward Lynch, who is an objector. Mr Lynch, are you online there, please? Mr Lynch? We might, if Mr Lynch, we might just move on to Mr Jacobson. Oh, Mr Lynch, is that you there, please? You're on mute at the moment, Mr Lynch.
Yes.
Mr Lynch, yes, if you wish to give your presentation, please, with respect to this rescission motion.
Mr Mayor, councillors, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak before you in regards to this matter at 6 Woolpack Road, Bacchus Marsh. If I may, a little background from our perspective. On the 16th of February, as you'd be aware, we appeared in front of Council's Development Assessment Committee, where the Planning Officer recommended approval of this matter. At the meeting, the motion was carried, including an amendment to remove Clause 4, which limited the duration of the permit. A week after that event, on February the 23rd, we were assured by Joyce Macklin of the Planning Department that the approval could be expected within 1 or 2 weeks. A further 2 weeks later, on the 7th of March, we were advised by Mark Lovell of the Planning Department that the matter would be heard again at the next Development Assessment Committee meeting, at which point there was no mention made to us of rescission or alternate condition language. On that same date, on the 7th of March and also the 8th of March, we received written notification from the Planning Department that the notice of motion was to be considered on the 16th of March. No detailed rescission motion nor alternate language was provided for us or the applicant. On the 15th of March, 1 day prior to the Development Application Committee meeting, we received an agenda outlining the notice of rescission and alternate language for inclusion, which would further limit the development approval. At no stage prior to this were we or the applicant made aware of the intention to rescind, nor of the alternate language. On the 16th of March, at the Development Advisory Committee, the matter could not be heard on procedural grounds. After that event, on the 17th of March, Mark Lovell advised that the Planning Department had not been advised by the Council's own Governance Department of the notice of rescission. He also advised that he was not familiar with the procedure of advising the applicant in the matter of a rescission. On March the 22nd, we then received notice that the matter was to be heard in front of this ordinary council meeting. Then on March the 29th, Mark Lovell, Henry Beswick and Robert Fillich of the council admitted that in the case of 6 Woolpack Road, that standard procedure had not been followed. Little wonder that we and the applicant had no confidence in the Planning Department.
Yes, Councillor Tatchell.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I mean, that's hearsay. We haven't got any information that's suggesting any of that to be fact. But
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Mr. Lynch, if you could, I understand you're an objection to this, but the process that we're now, I think it's probably better just to stick to what's being discussed tonight, if that's possible, please, rather than get historical background officers who actually aren't here to give their view of it. I'm not doubting what you're saying, but we don't have that that luxury to have that with them. So if you could please just sort of keep your comments to the rescission itself, what's being proposed tonight.
I appreciate that. I think that, and that was context around our lack of confidence in the Planning Department, if I may. I think given that, if I may, and in summary, I think there are some key questions that probably need to be answered. I think we'd ask those openly in this forum and on record, and that is, given that Councillor Berry, who voted in favour of the removal of clause 4 on February 17th...
Mr Lynch, please, I think we have to be very careful here. This is a rescission motion we're dealing with, and I think we have to have regard to the process brought us to this point in time and respect that. We have to make sure we follow due process here on. So please refrain from sort of naming councillors and what they voted for and not knowing for, please. It's just better to just stick with the rescission motion itself and not who did what, please.
Okay, now, but I still think that the crux of this matter is when, in fact, was the decision made to rescind the motion of the meeting of the 16th of February? When were parties within the council elected and officers informed of the intention of this motion? We certainly had no notice of this.
Point of order, if I may,
yes,
Mr.
Councillor Tatchell, your point of order, please.
I think it goes back to, look, I'm quite comfortable that the applicant's representative is more than welcome to ask those questions, but the matter in front of us is purely about the rescission motion. So I think you've asked a couple of times for it to be confined to that. I'd ask that we reiterate that again, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Mr Lynch, if you could just perhaps deal with the rescission motion itself that's on the agenda here tonight, please. I think that's probably the way we need to progress it rather than diverging off that, please.
I will, but obviously the background is important to us in terms of understanding. In terms of the rescission motion, clearly the rescission motion is unacceptable to the applicant. We did present on the 16th of February. It was with support of the Planning Department. It was approved. The subject condition in regards to clause 4 that limited the duration, in fact created a temporary permit, was removed at that stage. We are not aware of any change in circumstance or condition that has seen this a change in position and this alternate language that is being proposed tonight. The applicant believes that that this is unfair, an unfair restriction on any approval, and clearly believe that due process has not been followed in terms of information and the handling of the rescission motion. I don't know what more I can say, but I would ask you to consider that.
Thank you, Mr Lynch. Councillors, any questions of Mr Lynch? Okay. Thank you, Mr Lynch. Your council will note your submission and will make a decision in not too distant future. So once again, thank you very much for your presentation. The next speaker is Mr Glenn Jacobson. Mr Jacobson, are you there, please? Mr Jacobson? Is Mr Jacobson online? I'm just wondering if Mr Fiali was there. We could perhaps just have Mr Fiali, if Mr Jacobson is just tied up at the moment. We might just alter the presenters. Either Mr Jacobson or Mr Fiali. Are you available, please? Neither Mr Jacobson or Mr Fiali are available at the moment. Well, I believe so, yes. May give them a few minutes. They'd be fair and reasonable to allow that, but if they're unable to join us within a few minutes, we may have to just go forward. Oh, Councillor Tatchell, sorry.
That's all right, Mr Mayor, just trying to get your attention. While we're waiting, I just note that we don't have, should this rescission motion be successful, there's been no foreshadow of an alternate motion that probably needs to be produced. So I'm sure we'll foreshadow.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Tatchell. I think we had that discussion, before you...
before I got here.
Yeah, no, there was a bit of a discussion, and fundamentally it is virtually rescission in two parts. First of all, point 1 has to be rescinded, and if the success of point 1, if it's received, then you move on to point 2. If point 1 doesn't get up, then the whole thing falls. It doesn't go any further.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
So is that Mr Jacobson online? Mr Jacobson, welcome to our meeting with respect to item 11.1. Do you wish to give a presentation, please?
Yeah, hi. Just to inform, Mr Fiali won't be speaking tonight, so obviously I'm working alongside with Edward Lynch. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Sorry, there's a bit of lag and it's actually repeating itself twice, so I might have to log out and log back in.
Well, we can certainly hear you. I might just switch my microphone off if that helps. Oh, okay. We just seemed having a bit of trouble getting Mr Jacobson back again. We'll just give him a few minutes. Obviously, Mr Fiala is not available, so after Mr Jacobson, that'll be the last of the speakers. Mr Jacobson, welcome back. You're on mute at the moment, Mr Jacobson, please. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. If you please give your presentation.
Yeah, hi. Again, we're representing the applicant, the Fialis at 6 Woolpack Road. Thank you. We don't have Mr Fiali talking tonight. We would obviously like to object to the rescission motion and support everything that Edward had said. So I don't have anything further to add to that.
Thank you, Mr Jacobson. Councillors, any question of Mr Jacobson? Okay. Thank you, Mr Jacobson, and your submission will be duly noted, and we also note that Mr Fiali was unavailable to be here this evening. So we'll hand over. Thank you very much for that, and Council will make a decision shortly. So, councillors, I'm in your hands, please. Councillor Berry, please.
Thank you. I'd like to put forward the motion that the resolution for item 7.6 from the Development Assessment Committee held on the 16th of February 2022 be rescinded.
And I second that.
Councillors, we have a mover and a seconder for the rescission motion of item 7.6 of the Development Assessment Committee held on the 16th of February. Is there any opposition to this?
I've got a question, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Edwards, please.
I'd just like to know what additional information was attained since the decision was made that warranted the rescission motion.
Councillor Berrios, to respond to that, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Edwards. On the night, I was a little bit confused with what I felt was some misleading information demountable permits versus housing permits. So based on that, I put the rescission through.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Berry. Any further questions, councillors?
Yeah, another one, if I may,
Councillor
Mr.
Edwards,
Mayor.
please. Thank you.
So was the councillor aware that it was a 7-2 vote on the night?
No, I wasn't.
5-2, I think, Councillor, yeah.
5-2, Mr.
The
Mayor.
CEO doesn't generally vote, but anyway, thank you.
The 8th councillor.
Thank you. I'm assuming that a councillor was aware of that?
I actually wasn't aware of the 5-2 vote. I just heard the unanimous and... Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, councillors, we have a mover, Councillor Berry, seconded Councillor Dudzik, to the rescission motion, item 1 on this paper.
I object, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry?
I object.
Okay, we have a dissent. Councillor Berry, you wish to speak to the motion, please?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for the rescind motion to get up, the proposed building was to resolve current COVID physical distancing measures, which has reduced the current operational capacity. Expansion of the abattoir in absence of these workplace conditions would not be supported due to the farming provisions. The proposal is a temporary solution without increasing employee numbers. The time limit prevents long-term occupation at the Bacchus Marsh site and enables the operators to comply with COVID restrictions. The condition also includes, unless otherwise agreed to by council, this allows the operator to apply for additional time if special circumstances apply, such as a future pandemic. If the additional building remains on the land permanently, it will be well suited to an alternative industrial type activity when the abattoir relocates rather than being utilised for a farming purpose. It will also make it more difficult into the future to refuse a change of use planning application for industry with a recently constructed industrial building already on the land. I am also simply looking out for the people's avenue of honour. Thank you.
Councillor Berry. Councillor Dudzik, a seconder to the motion. Do you wish to respond, please?
The recommendation that was in the council papers on the 16th of February was actually the right recommendation. It enabled the business owner to have temporary expansion on his site so that he could manage through COVID. It had a set time frame so that it was a restricted period and not an ongoing activity. The temporary time frame, it is appropriate, and we have actually done that previously in this council. In fact, we did do it to another permit that was approved in the Avenue of Honour itself in the last couple of years. There was a time frame put on the use of that permit in that manner in that case. And I believe that a time frame would be appropriate. That is not the type, it's not an acceptable use on that land, in my opinion, and we want better for the Avenue of Honour.
Councillor Dudzik. Councillor Edwards, are you objecting to the rescission motion, please? Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, yes, no worries. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So firstly, I want to correct a few things. We're not actually changing the use of the land. The use is for an abattoirs and will be and has been for 50 years. So for us to say that we want to get rid of the abattoirs, as Councillor Dudzik just pointed out then, is an incorrect statement. We're not doing that at all. What we're actually doing is we're actually looking at a permit to put in an extended cool room area so that they can actually work in isolation in COVID. COVID is not going to go away in 2 or 3 years. In fact, it's probably cost this business significant money, the fact that we've had to wait another month when they've had another COVID outbreak and they've had to cease operations. So this sort of dilly and dallying and making decisions, not making decisions, costs business money. No wonder businesses don't want to come to Moorabool and want to go elsewhere. If council can't make clear and concise decisions.
Point of order.
Yeah, Councillor Tatchell, please.
Based on relevance, I mean, I think we're talking about a rescind motion here.
We are. We're talking about the rescind motion, the cost of a rescind motion that goes to someone. So
point of order, and I'm
Sorry,
sure,
Councillor Tatchell.
I'm sure Councillor Edwards would gladly get back to the actual situation at hand or the item at hand.
If we just sort of, with the rescission motion itself, Councillor Edwards, it's probably more pertinent to what's on the business paper,
okay,
please.
So whilst we note that this is a temporary structure or a non-permanent structure, which means it's removable, there are many removable buildings within our shire, including our own shire offices within the back of the Balan office there, which has been there for 30 or 40 years. It's a business decision as to when an organisation should move. We are not here to change the permit for use. If in the future they do decide to move this business, as Councillor Berry pointed out, any subsequent use would have to come to council for approval. And that would be the appropriate time, the appropriate opportunity to consider what use that land will be moving forward. We are not considering, with what is put forward tonight, what the use of the land will be. We are looking at a structure. With that, Mr Mayor, I think that the original decision was the right decision. I don't believe we would be held up, we would be withheld in VCAT if we are to put a temporary meaning on it, and that is challenged in VCAT. I believe we'll lose. I believe it's a waste of ratepayers' money, and I believe the original decision should stand. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Any other councillors speaking for or against the rescission motion? Councillor Tatchell, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I'll take on board some of the things that Councillor Edwards had said. I think the one thing that is correct is that we are talking about a building, and whilst I accept that there are other demantleable buildings in the Shire, you'd be hard-pressed to find an industrial one that doesn't have a sunset clause. In terms of this particular building, it is on a farm zone, but I do realise that under existing use, had a permit gone through for a permanent building, I'm sure it would have been approved based on existing use. The real issue here is that we're allowing a demountable building on the Avenue of Honour or anywhere without a sunset clause, and it's more about precedent, because once you allow one demountable industrial building, it does open the floodgates for anyone who wants to put a temporary business in place. It is the gateway to Bacchus Marsh, to basically do it without a sunset clause. And whilst I accept that in terms of existing use that there are demountable buildings, including the one at the Shire, I'm sure when it was put there, there was an intention to build something, and it probably came back to funding. I mean, we don't have any documents in front of us to say that there wasn't a sunset clause when that was put there, or any other building for that matter. I think when we're trying to confuse the issue with permanent structures and demountable structures, and then domestic structures versus industrial structures, and then where they are, I think we're allowing ourselves a very difficult position in terms of precedent. So what I'm suggesting, I don't have an issue with how long the sunset clause is, but I think the key point in all this is to make sure that whenever we put a demountable industrial or commercial building in place, that it has a sunset clause of some description. As was discussed at the meeting, at any point in time, the applicant can come back to council and say, well, I need more time for whatever reason, and I'm sure that that would be accepted exactly the same way as the planning department in this case put together a plan that, one, compromised the farm zone but understood the situation, accepted the fact that it was existing use, and put in place a very reasonable position for council to follow in terms of putting something on a zone that is not normally permitted. So I think if we confuse this issue any more than that, other than precedent, I think we're probably taking in the areas we don't need to be being. You know, I think it was a perfectly sensible arrangement that was put before council. that was altered. What concerns me is that if you want to have a Hooverville, the best way to do that is allow demountable buildings in any place, industrial, commercial, any place in the Shire that doesn't have a sunset clause. And what we will find, we will be inundated with applications where people will put their temporary Millard caravans there to do to sell items. We'll end up with a Coffs Harbour type approach to selling bananas on the side of the road, where those buildings have been allowed over existing use. So all I'm talking about here, Mr Mayor, is let's just have a sensible precedent. Don't care how long it is. It's as long as it needs to be. I'm not trying to interfere with industry or an employment basis of Bacchus Marsh and locals. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to make sure that we have a sensible precedent in place. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Any other speakers for or against the rescission motion? Okay, Councillor Berry, we wish to close the debate, please.
Yes, thank you. Just basically want to reiterate, I'm simply looking out. Sorry, I didn't have the light on. Basically, I just want to reiterate that I'm simply looking out for the people's avenue of honour. Demountable is just that, demountable. Otherwise, why do we have these permits? And the 7 years is reasonable, and as it says on the motion, that it could be removed from the site within 7 years of the completion of the development, unless otherwise agreed to by council. So there's opportunities there for it to apply to council and for it to be extended. Thank you,
Councillor Berry. Councillors, the debate is now closed. I will put that point 1 to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Yeah. Oh, well, it's lost. Thank you. Next item is now item 12.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, can I just have it noted that this is the third time we're putting the applicant under fiscal difficulties? Or is that...
No, well, but, sorry.
That's...
Councillor Tatchell, you wish to say something?
I think the council wants a division.
Division, sorry. I meant...
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Councillors, as Councillor Berry has called for a division on the rescission motion, so all those in favour, I'll just put your hand up. Councillor Tatchell, Councillor Berry, Councillor Dudzik. All those against? Councillor Minari, Councillor Ward, Councillor Edwards and Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Next item is item 12.1, Draft Public Art and Collections Policy. I'll hand over to Ms Jones, who will then introduce Ms Kerry Grieve to lead us through that, please.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. We're presenting the draft public art policy to Council to seek to take this out for community consultation and to then bring the feedback back to Council to a briefing to inform of any feedback or change that may need to go ahead. And we're happy to take questions from Council.
Councillor Tatchell, please.
I'd like to move it, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Second.
Second.
Councillor Berry.
Yes, I'd like to second. Thank you.
Any opposition? I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Just a question. When will it and how long will it go out for public exhibition, Ms Jones?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the normal time, the usual time is for 2 weeks, but I might just, through you, hand that over to our Arts and Culture Officer to answer that.
Yes. Ms Kerry Grieve, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it is a 2-week period that it's out for public consultation.
Okay. Councillor Ward, you have a question there, please? You're on mute at the moment, Councillor Ward.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. I actually had my hand up before the motion was moved. I did have a couple of questions. Am I still permitted to ask those?
Certainly. Hasn't been put yet, so.
Yep. My concern was, well, sorry, not a concern. I've 3 questions. The first was that on page 11 it said the draft policy has been benchmarked against best practice. My question was who is best practice and what do we regard as best practice?
That's your first question. Ms
Yes.
Jones, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll pass that across to Kerry Grieve.
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it was benchmarked against other public art policies from surrounding shires, as well as other similar sized shires nationally as well.
Okay. Did you hear that response, Councillor Ward, please? The benchmark was
Yeah.
against... Yeah. You had a supplementary question or a further question there, please, I believe?
Yeah, I wish to express some concern that it says at the top of the page 11, a contribution for public art should be provided for any significant works undertaken by the Shire that are community facility projects or streetscape projects, and this contribution is 1% of the approved project budget with a maximum of $250,000. I think I'd be far more comfortable if, and I am in favour of purchasing public art, but that it went through the normal budget process. I don't think it should be a defined percentage, so I am concerned about that. And if I may continue, my last one is, so under attachment 1 on page 7 of attachment 1, 7.2 mentions the Public Art and Collections Expert Advisory Committee. I don't see a councillor sitting on that, which does concern me because I understand there's been a lot, well, I've recognised there's been a lot of controversy over the purchase of public art in other municipalities, and it's created some angst among ratepayers. So I would suggest that under 8.1 that the Public Art and Collections Expert Advisory Committee has a delegations of authority which limits the amount that they can spend without council approval, because I would think that anything that's going to be purchased of a significant amount, and we can discuss what that amount may be, should come to council for council approval, because we are spending the ratepayers' money, and we need to be mindful that as the elected councillors, we've got to make sure it's being spent correctly.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. I guess given this tonight is proposed to go out for public exhibition and feedback, I think the points you made just before are quite salient, and ones that could actually feed into that process, I would believe. So I think they're duly noted. Is that correct, Ms Jones? Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Okay, we have a mover and a second, Councillor Tatchell and Councillor Berry. Any dissent? I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Next item is item 13.1. Councillor Tatchell, you noted conflict of interest, and please note that Councillor Tatchell is leaving the room, please. Thank you. Thank you. We have a speaker to this item, Ms Helen Tatchell. Ms Tatchell, are you online, please? Ms Tatchell? Yes, you're on. Welcome, Ms Tatchell. You wish to give your presentation, please, with respect to item 13.1?
Tatchell? Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You wish to give your presentation, please, with respect to item 13.1? Yep, that's fine. I just turned off the other audio. So yes, I'm, as you know, I am objecting to the street name to Shamrock Court that is proposed. And I put in an I put in an objection for it to be Duncan Street North. On further investigation, I'd like to put in an alternate objection, if I may, and that would be to have the court called Simpson Court. And I'll just explain brief background. So, and I read from the Blandshire Historical Society, The Settler, which is their newsletter from June 2003, volume 7, number 2. So in June 2002, Moorabool Shire Council attracted funding under the state government Pride of Place program, and that was to prepare an urban design framework for the Bland Township. And in that they identified, they wanted to develop street signage. So in that study, they found that there was an early map of Bland Township dated 1856, and in that there was a survey done of the town back then, and within that framework there were the names of 8 streets were identified. One included Simpson Street, and of those streets they've been named to recognise persons of significance in Bland. So in that we have Mr Simpson, and he was actually from around 1854, 1855, he was acknowledged in the Walsh papers, and a reference was made in the Densley and Lewin memoirs as an early school teacher. Mr Simpson was actually the first teacher at the denominational school established by the Church of England in Bolan. So from this reference, it has generally been accepted that Simpson Street received its name from this early school teacher. So, and I talk about significance in the names. And the names were selected as on the basis of historical significance. They are the street names there. So, in saying that and getting back to it, there is, if I may say, so the alternate objection is to call Duncan Street what is known as North, I guess, into Simpson Court. Why? Because you can't enter, and for the record, I'll refer to it as Simpson Court. So you can't, the application who wants to name the road Shamrock Court, that's only one premises, one house in there, which I believe is an Airbnb as well as a B&B, Airbnb, and also a place of residence for the applicant on this. However, it's only one. She lives at number 26, I think. So it talks about in here, it talks about in the report actually from council officers that it would be difficult to locate due to vehicles not being able to access this section of the road via English Street, which is true. So they have to actually come round down Simpson Street and up into what I will call Simpson Court. Now, anyone, if you have got that into your GPS, Shamrock Court, Simpson Court, that would be, it would come up, but you can't access it from the main road. You have to do, you've got to come down Steed Street, round past Mill Park and go in that way. Now, the report also says there are 3 houses currently addressed to this section of what is known as Duncan Street. When it is officially renamed, these property owners will need to have their addresses changed. Well, that's actually not true, because if you look at your map that's in front of you in the report, you have Simpson Street, and then it's got highlighted there Duncan Street, which could be called Simpson Court. And the applicant's number is 26. So this gets a little bit confusing, but 37 and 35 are actually Simpson Street. Number 27 and 28 says on there are other areas. Now, 27 is actually being sold and is actually the backyard of 37, who resides in Simpson Street. Number 28 is actually the garage to number 35, who is in Simpson Street. There are letterboxes at number 28. So number 33 and 35 are in Simpson Street, and their letterboxes are outside number 28, which is actually next door to 26. So the postman already goes up what could be called Simpson Court off Simpson Street for 35 and 33. So I can't see any much difference really in going to 26 when it's only about 10 metres from the other letterbox. So I can't see a massive problem in that when they say mail will have to be changed and addresses will have to be changed. Well, that's probably a little bit incorrect. So there's only one entry from Simpson Street where everyone goes into now. There's only one address, which is number 26, who will have vehicles going up there into what could be known as Simpson Court. The people who live on Simpson Street, their garage is 28. So really, it's a funny sort of thing. But anyway, so both vacant lots are, as I said, one's a garage and one's a backyard. But it comes back to, for simplicity, it comes back to renaming or naming streets, person of significance in the town or region, and it must relate to historical connections. So in saying that, Mr Mayor, that was my summary, and I'll welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ms Tatchell. Any questions, Ms Tatchell, please, councillors? Councillor Dudzik, you have a question, please?
Were you given the opportunity to put this forward to council officers to consider, and what was their response?
Ms Tatchell, did you hear the question? Are you able to respond to that, please?
Yes, I did hear the question, and No, I wasn't even contacted to speak tonight. I actually had to make my own arrangements. I thought, being an objector, I might be contacted to speak, but I wasn't.
I may be wrong, but I think Councillor Thatcher was asking, did you have an opportunity earlier when this process was being, early days of the process, an opportunity to input? I'm assuming that's Councillor Thatcher, Dudzik, as you're saying? So it's really not tonight, but just previous to this, please.
Yes, I had lodged an official objection, but in the name of Duncan Street North, and tonight I am putting it forward that I have an alternate objection to call the street not Shamrock. It's only a symbol. It's got nothing to do, there's no significance at all, and to rename it Simpson Court for the simplicity that it runs off Simpson Street.
I would like to move the recommendation in the council papers, but that we actually rename the street to Simpson Court, Balan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would probably recommend that we defer, and then we would contact the relevant department. That would probably be the sensible, because from a naming point of view, we need to go through a process with them and get their approval.
So I move to defer this item so that we can go through the appropriate processes to approve Simpson Court.
Question, if I may, Mr. Mayor. It seems to have gone all quiet. I'll ask the question and hopefully somebody...
No, sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
No worries. My question is, we recently, there was another application from individuals in Backer Street, and the information that came back was that there's a review going on by a government agency on naming conventions for new streets. Is that correct?
You will respond to that, Mr. CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. That is correct, Councillor Edwards. That review is currently being undertaken by state government at this moment. It is not complete at this moment in time, but it's due to be complete shortly, and then we will actually base our policy off that document going forward.
So with that, Councillor Dudzik, I'd like to just slightly amend and just say that we will defer this item until such time as the state government policy has been completed, and council can consider that.
The mover happy with that?
To do that?
Second, I think Councillor Minari second. Are you happy with that rather than amend a motion formally? Okay. Councillors, we have a recommendation to defer this with the added input from Councillor Edwards about waiting for some information to come back. So I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Could somebody please advise Councillor Tatchell to come into the room again? Councillor Tatchell, that item was deferred. Could you please note that Councillor Tatchell re-entered the room at 6:49, please? The motion was deferred. The recommendation was deferred, Councillor Tatchell. So we'll revisit that in the future. Next item is item 13.2. We have two speakers to this item, Mr. David Marnie and Ms. Kate Sharkey. Is Mr. Marnie available, please? Mr. Marnie, I see you there, Mr. Marnie. Welcome. If you could just give your presentation with regard to 13.2, please.
Next item is item 13.2. We have two speakers to this item, Mr. David Marnie and Ms. Kate Sharkey. Is Mr. Marnie available, please?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am available.
You could just give your
Oh,
presentation.
thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I just ticked the box that said, I believe that if I was prepared to put a submission into the rate review, then I should be prepared to just explain to council. So I just want to say that I strongly support option 2, which will provide a small relief for farmers. And I think it's important in a peri-urban area that we have especially support for farming enterprises within Moorabool. I think farming enterprises are an unsung positive aspect of life here, and it's good that council has made efforts over the years to safeguard the Bacchus Marsh Irrigation District, to provide support for our farmers on our grasslands. But I do think that it would be endemic for council to consider other options, and particularly those options that exist in neighbouring councils, such as Melton, the city of Greater Geelong. And in particular in Melton, there is the rural rebate schemes for farmers that actually control noxious weeds and deal with vermin, particularly those noxious weeds that have an impact on farms from neighbouring properties, offering property. Often those properties are owned by land bankers, and one such weed that's a real detriment to our economic livelihood is, for example, serrated tussock. I also think it's endemic that council, when you're considering the rates, is also looking at our rate base and just remembering that Moorabool is, after all, just an administrative construct that came from the Kennett government's review of local government boundaries. And it seems to me that it's very worthwhile for councillors and council officers to always consider that you benchmark the rate base that we have so that you can provide services that at least meet the level of those that are provided by our neighbouring local government authorities, either in the city of Melton, the city of Ballarat, the city of Greater Geelong and Hepburn Shire. And I believe that if Moorabool is unable to provide those levels of services, both in our infrastructure and in our community services and in our support for those who are providing an economic support, then we need to look further about how our boundaries can better service the people who live in our rural areas. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And once again, I'd really like to commend you, and it seems from reading the paper that you would be considering option 2, that is maintaining or increasing the, to allow our farming rates not to increase. In our farm, for example, our rates increased.
Mr. Marnie, if I may, tonight council is not making a decision on any model. This is actually to receive the community feedback. That what you just touched upon is something that will occur later on, but just tonight, the business paper, it is to adopt the community feedback. So, and obviously you have some feedback and you've sort of articulated that tonight, but this recommendation tonight is just to receive all the feedback that came in from community members, including yours. So just to make it quite clear, we're not voting on a particular model tonight, that's all.
Okay, no, thanks very much. In that case, I do hope that you consider option 2 and that you consider ways in which you can continue to support legitimate farming enterprises and other agricultural enterprises within our peri-urban area.
Thank you, Mr. Marnie. Thank you for your presentation. Any questions of Mr. Marnie, councillors? Okay, thank you very much, and your submission will be duly considered. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Kate Sharkey. Is Ms. Sharkey available, please? Ms. Sharkey? Oh, you're either standing on your side or something's gone wrong there. Ms. Sharkey, you're sort of you're at an oblique angle. Well, I'm not quite sure. You're about. You need to rotate it 90 degrees. I think it'll actually make it.
So I've had to, yeah, look, I'm sorry, my laptop's not working, so I'm off my phone. So
okay.
That's as good as I can get.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Please, welcome along. And if you could please give your response in regard to the recommendation tonight, which is actually to adopt the community feedback regarding the strategy. Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Yes, I do support, obviously, council endorsing the community feedback. It's interesting to see that there has been some good support for option 2, which is to give some minimal decrease in the differential for the farm rate and extractive sectors. But I really wanted to, and for that matter, the small decrease that we possibly could get through the differential, it really won't even offset the huge spike in the rate rise we got last year, and indeed probably won't even put a dent in the, one would suggest, another rise that we'll get this year. So I'd just like councillors to take that on board, that whilst it might look nice that you possibly will give potentially a decrease in the differential for the farm rate, it will hardly touch the sides when you're looking at rate bills anywhere from, you know, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. So I just would like to make that clear. I just want to really touch on the actual process of this review. It's very important that the opportunity was given, and everyone was very supportive when we heard that council were going to do an independent review on what is a very, very important part of the whole council process, which is the rating strategy. Feeds directly into your budget and everything is reliant on it. So we were really excited that that was going to take place, and would give a great opportunity to really unpack the rating strategy, which has been a big issue for a long time. And councillors are very aware of the long-standing issue, as it was mentioned with the previous speaker, in a peri-urban environment. It makes it incredibly difficult on many fronts to run a successful and sustainable business when you have these type of rate spikes ongoing. So around the review, when it came up that there were going to be a number of options, I thought they were quite limited, and I actually rang councillors at the time. I rang some newer councillors and asked them for what their views were, and I asked two what I thought were pretty important questions. And one was, would there be an opportunity to put forward some other options? I think, again, it was suggested in that last speaker, neighbouring shires do have other options. And I was told emphatically that yes, we would be given an opportunity to put forward other options for consideration. Clearly, those options were never given. The second question was asked not only by myself, but a lot of other growers, and that was, if council were going to the extent of getting an independent review done by external consultants, then if it was going to be a really transparent, robust, factual review, why wouldn't consultants have the opportunity to go and speak to different business sectors across the Shire? So they weren't just being fed information from council. They were indeed getting as much information as possible from people who obviously are directly affected by this rating strategy. Again, that opportunity was never presented to anyone that I'm aware of. So I guess my question really tonight, or my feedback that I wanted to give, is that while it's a good step in the right direction, it's really just a little bit of showboating, I might add. Perhaps council are looking to suggest that they might want to help the farming community, which really won't do much. And the real issue I have is the way the review was done, and why didn't council afford those other opportunities instead of what seems to have...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I thought it was about receiving...
Councillor
Evans. I thought this was about receiving feedback, not about the whole process.
Thank you,
Well, I
Councillor.
think it's...
Ms Sharkey, it does relate to this recommendation. I think we're sort of getting into the next something following on, please.
Thank you. I agree with that we do need to take on the community feedback. But that being said, that's the whole point. The review was to get a whole heap of community feedback, and a lot of that wasn't given to the community. So that's the question I'm asking. So perhaps going forward, is council going to allow more information, so a more robust and more transparent review for this very important strategy is given?
Thank you, Ms Sharkey. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councillors, any questions, Ms Sharkey? Councillor Tatchell, please.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and understanding that, yes, we're here just to accept the community feedback, but we do have speakers to the item, and there was a number of issues that have been brought up by both speakers. So the question would be to the last speaker, on the basis that obviously there was some issues in terms of what was presented for the community feedback. What were the parts that, or what were the sections of that community consultation that we could improve on, or the parts that you believe that were missing from the consultation?
Ms Sharkey, do you hear the question from Councillor Tatchell, please?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, I was led to believe that there would be more options given. When I asked councillors about that, they said there would be, and those other options were never were never suggested or given. And councillors know full well that there are other options and other mechanisms over the last 10 years through countless submissions and the like. There has been other options put up, and this very important review, which they could have done that, chose not to. And again, like the other question was around the actual consultant. Why are we spending money, ratepayers' money, on an independent consultant if that consultant is not getting all the available information?
Point of order again, Mr. Mayor. We are still not talking. We are still diverting from the fact that this is purely to receive community feedback, and any such discussion should be limited to that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Duly noted. Yeah, Ms. Sharkey, please just sort of and. The consultant council needed an independent person to review it, to do peer review with other councils. So clearly where we're at the moment is to receive this community feedback, and I think it'd be helpful if we could just sort of contain the conversation to that particular item, if that's okay, please.
Well, yeah, look, I just find it contradictory though. Yes, I want community feedback to be taken on board, and I hope council endorse it, but I say again, it's half-hearted because you've not got all the information that you possibly could have had through the review.
Okay, thank you. We duly note your comments. Thank you for that. Any further questions of Ms Sharkey, please, councillors? Okay, thank you, Ms Sharkey. Thanks for your... Councillor Budzik, please.
I would like to move that council receives the community feedback regarding the rate structure review. I'm changing the word from adopt to receive because I think it could be misinterpreted. We are receiving the feedback. We're not making a decision on anything at this point. It'll come back later.
Thank you. Councillor Dudzik has moved the recommendation with a change from adopts to receives. Is there a seconder for that, please?
So seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Edwards, thank you. Any opposition? I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Where to from here, Mr. CEO? What's the process going forward? Just to...
Through the chair, I'll pass that to Caroline, and Caroline will probably just take us where is the next steps in this particular process.
Ms. Bazoon, what's the next part of the process, please, if you're able to respond?
Sure. So next week, Council will hear from the Valuer General to understand the proposed changes for next year by the Valuer General, and also hear from officers, council officers, about the particular impact of those changes on Moorabool. And the following week, so on the 20th of April, there will be a final workshop for councils to make some decisions that will be adopted at the following council meeting. So that will be the May council meeting.
Thank you for that upgrade. Councillor Tatchell, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I suppose I just have a question that, understanding that we still are going to workshop the actual rating strategy and the differential rate. And I know that we've been briefed internally on the cause and effects of the windfall tax as it sits, and I do see it as a separate issue in terms of rating, but in consideration that it has been mentioned that the valuation system is very prevalent, that maybe we need to get a more formal report on the ramifications of the windfall tax and in terms of how it will affect us going forward in terms of how we can budget, because there may be significant changes to the differential rating system by definition of the windfall tax on ownership, on the basis that the government will be partaking in, and they do maintain best use when they value these properties, but they will certainly be putting their hand out as a vested interest in terms of the value. So I think it would have a considerable differential in what the real value of those properties are when they're calculated using the differential as the guideline.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell.
Terrible question, I'm sorry.
Is that, I think there's a question there somewhere. Is that something that can be sort of fed to the valuer?
I think we'll just have to take that one on notice because it is a separate item, but there's absolutely no doubt it has an impact on the valuations and will going forward. So it is a factor that we have to consider. Thank you.
And we're having a meeting with the valuer generals, which will be interesting as well.
Yeah.
Okay. We had a mover and a second, and I think this is passed, hasn't it? I sort of going backwards.
I think we're through that.
You're trying to confuse me. You're doing a good job. Thank you.
My apologies.
No, that's fine. Thank you. The next item is item 14.1, notice of motion 298 and 299, hard waste collection and transfer station vouchers. There is a recommendation there, councillors. There was an alternate motion circulated from Councillor Ward. So I'm assuming councillors have a copy of that. So councillors, I'm in your hand. Councillor Ward, are you moving your alternate motion that you circulated or not?
Yes, I'd like to move the alternate motion, Mr Mayor.
Councillor's got a copy.
I'll second it.
I'd like to move this item with an amendment, please.
Well, I guess we'll see what the amendment, if you could propose your amendment, and that may be up to the mover and seconder as to whether they would accept it rather than go through the formal process, please.
I'm just suggesting instead of a 3-year trial period, could we have a 2-year trial period so the decision would then be made by the current council?
The mover and seconder, did you hear the proposed change that was put forward by Councillor Berry, limiting this to this particular period of council rather than going into another council?
I'm okay with that.
Councillor Ward, did you hear that, please?
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out. So if it starts in 22-23, the next election will be in
24.
November 24. So we will barely have 2 years worth of data. So I'm questioning whether that will probably give us the information we need. Look, I'm flexible. I think a trial's...
Well,
I'll take that back then. I take on board Rod's point. I don't accept the amendment.
So basically, what are you suggesting? You're not accepting that the amendment?
I'd like to move the ultimate motion I put forward initially, Mr Mayor. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask a question on the... So when Councillor Ward was just saying it wouldn't end up being in our period, the 2 years... How did he explain that?
I think what he's saying is that this is point 1 notes, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is proposing to start in the 2022-23 financial year, which is be July next year. And the next election of council is 2024, which is less than 2 years from when that particular starting date of commencing the financial year 2022-23. So 2 years it put into 2025 then, which would be in the next council.
If I propose the amendment to be 18 months, would that bring us inside
I guess we don't want to get into a bidding war. Councillors, I'm in your hands, so I just need... We have a mover and a seconder, so they would have... the easiest way if they were prepared to accept that, or we go through a formal amendment to the recommendation, the alternate recommendation that's moved and seconded. So, Councillor Ward, what's your position?
Yeah, look, I think we need this issue has been on council's books and debated for several years, and I think the only way we can get meaningful feedback from the ratepayers on whether they want this service or not is to run a trial. Now, I don't think we can run a trial for 18 months because that'll only give us 1 year's worth of data. I think we need to run it, in my view, for 3 years. That way the new council will have the benefit of the feedback of the ratepayers, and if they're basically, for example, if there's a 10% take-up of the vouchers, then clearly the residents don't like it. If there's a significant take-up, then the residents have voted with their feet, and the new council then can make a decision based on the results of the trial. So I'm comfortable in my alternate motion recommending a 3-year trial of this service, Mr Mayor.
Okay, so basically the amendment that was just noted by Councillor Berry is not accepted by the mover nor the seconder. So we go back to that one that's been already circulated. Are there any opposition? Councillor Tatchell, please. Oh, no, sorry, Councillor Ward, you, as the mover of the alternate motion, do you wish to open the debate, please?
Yeah, look, I suppose I'll repeat an earlier comment. This has been on Council's books for some years. It's been voted on a couple of occasions. What was significant to me was the results from both the urban and the rural areas show that the majority of participants in the survey, and there was 743 responses, indicated they would support, let's call them tip vouchers. There were 582 incidents of illegal dumping last year. Up until the end of February this year, there's already been 620 incidents of illegal dumping. I think that's a blight on the Shire. I think the tip vouchers may lead to a reduction in illegal dumping. And I think the cost for the per tenement of the tip vouchers is significantly cheaper than going to the tip. I know when I go to the tip and I have a trailer, it's over $100. So I would be quite happy to pay a $19 increase per tenement to get a tip voucher, and that's just an example. But I'm doing this for the community, not for my benefit, I might add. So I'm quite keen to see this trial run and let the ratepayers and the residents of Moorabool vote with their feet on whether they want this service.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Dudzik, you were second. Sorry, yes, please.
Tip vouchers have been wanted by the community for the 10 years I've been on council. You repeatedly get asked for them. I've actually voted to have tip vouchers a number of times and been voted down. I think that having a trial is a good thing because we can see if it works, we can see what the take-up is from the community, and if it isn't taken up, then it can be changed in the future. This is one way to fight illegal dumping. It's also giving the community what they've been asking for many years. And with the 3-year trial period that was suggested by Councillor Ward, I think that's actually really quite good because when a new council is elected, they will have a year to settle into being councillors before this decision is thrown on them. And you don't want that in the first 6 months of your council term to have to make a decision like this. I think there's enough for new councillors to learn that they don't need this in the first 6 months. So give them a little time to settle in. They can have adequate data, see what the take-up is. Originally, many years ago, I actually put forward the green waste, and at the time, the argument was no one will want it. It's not going to be popular, and it was a trial. Well, guess what? The community wanted it. We gave them a chance, and there is significant take-up. So let's see how the tip vouchers work out.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Councillor Tatchell. Sorry, do you have a question? Yes, Councillor Minari.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Could we confirm, so is this trial to be implemented Shire-wide? Yes, yep, great,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tatchell.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I came into this argument kicking and screaming, and I had Councillor Ward had me convinced on that it needed to be trialled, and that was my sticking point, that based on the data that was put in front of us over the 10 years, the only way you could justify doing it was under a trial basis. We've done trials before in this Shire over 12 months, and we'll continue to do them over 12 months. I had the benefit of listening to Sebastian Klein on ABC this morning, who was talking about just this, because Moorabool, for whatever reason, got a mention on this before we'd even come to council. And Sebastian, those that have met him, was a Hepburn councillor that's probably one of the most passionate advocates for this type of thing that I've come across. And interestingly enough, that the presenter asked him what he thought of this, and the two things he said were that he says they do nothing, and he works with every shire in Victoria, they do nothing to stop illegal waste. So stick to the actual problem. The tip vouchers are great for local residents, but like everything, you get what you pay for. The take-up rate in shires across Victoria has always been less than 30%, which means that other people are paying for the benefit of other people. What the trial would done would give us a clear understanding. We've got 2,100 square kilometres of residents that only partially would be able to use this, and in terms of maybe our urban counterparts would definitely use it. I'm not against our urban counterparts having it, but the reality is everybody has to pay for it. And so I don't accept that that you can't do a trial over 12 months. If we got to 12 months and we only had a 30% take-up, you would have to look at it financially and say, is this viable? Along with any other race. And keeping in mind that waste in Moorabool has always been a net-net situation. Whatever the cost of the contractor is distributed amongst everybody. And taking into account a lot of the people that live in Moorabool don't actually use that facility, but they're quite happy to pay for it. I think to enforce 3 years is very difficult on those people. And the other thing is that new council, whether they've been sitting in place for 12 months or not, is irrelevant. If we're setting a trial, we should be there for cradle to grave. You don't set a trial for another council to deliberate on. It defeats the purpose of having a trial. So, Councillor Ward convinced me yesterday this was a good idea, and we actually discussed the trial. And I suppose the only reason I'm not in it at the moment, Mr. Mayor, is the fact that the people that created this trial, created the expense, won't be there to accept whatever the consequences are of it and make a decision to deliberate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think you're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Get away with it. Thanks, Councillor Edwards, for that. I seek leave to speak against this item, if I may, councillors. I think basically this sends the wrong message. It's fair to say we all feel strongly about illegal dumping. I think anyone would be very passionate about this, but I don't think this is the correct response. The fundamental premise of what we have here is that giving these tip vouchers and that it's going to stop illegal dumping in this municipality. And I can't see that happening. Even in the report that we have before us, where there was 572 illegal dumping sites identified, and also 13 where they could get identifiable information as to who was dumping it. Only 2 were actually from Moorabool Shire. So we are making an assumption that a lot of the stuff that is dumped here is dumped by people from this shire. And I think that's a premise that I don't think stands up. Also, we have councils, neighbouring councils, Ballarat and Melton, who actually do have tip vouchers, and the take-up rate of those councils is 22% and 25% respectively. So 75 to 78% of people pay it but don't use it. I also would point out that there's 19,000 rate assessments in Moorabool Shire, rate assessments, and I think we have about 13,000 rateable properties that have dwellings. So there's 6,000 people, 6,000 property owners out there who will pay this additional $26 per tenement on top of the $85 per tenement they currently pay on their rate assessment. They've got no houses, they've got nothing, they still pay $85. So I think then all of a sudden, these people who don't pay, don't require the service, and now we're being hit up for $111 per annum per rate assessment when you combine the two to be able to pay for this. Now, I reckon this is a case of the many having to pay for the actions of the few, and I think it's not reasonable and it's not equitable. And if we want to have a trial, use the $85 there that's having a trial. Don't put the burden back on to have the trial, use that. But I think it's not fair, not reasonable, and it's just really a form of taxation. And the people who are having the laugh out of this, and even the stuff that's dumped, our own data says that 25% of the material that's dumped is paper or cardboard. They can take that to the transfer stations now for nothing. So quite clearly, we're dealing with recalcitrant people who don't care much about anything, and yet the bulk of the ratepayers expect to pay for their being incorrigible. So, councillors, I would urge you not to support this recommendation. Thank you. Now, Councillor Ward, do you want to close the debate, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I listened with interest to what you said, but results from both the urban and rural areas show that the majority of participants support this proposal, and I think a trial is the best way to go. I would flag an alternative if it's not approved, that we reduce the period from 3 years to 12 months. However, my initial motion, which I'm keen to see get up, is for 3 years. If that doesn't get up, I'd like to flag that alternative with you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillors, I'll put that to the vote based on the alternate recommendation that was circulated by Councillor Ward. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Edwards, I couldn't see your hand there, sorry.
In favour, Mr Mayor. Can you see me?
No, well, it was pretty dark. So were you voting for or against it? Sorry.
For it, Mr Mayor.
Okay, could we have that again? Sorry, you're in the black background there. All those in favour of it? All those against? It is carried. Thank you. And can I call a division? You certainly may. So all those in favour of the notice of motion to have the transfer station vouchers and hard waste collection, please, Councillor Minari, Councillor Ward, Councillor Edwards and Councillor Dudzik. All those against? Councillor Tatchell, Councillor Berry and Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. Moving on to the next item. Just hang on for a second, I'll catch up. Oh, other reports. So, any other reports? Neil, Mr CEO? Item 16.1, notice of motion. Councillor Ward, you have a notice of motion at item 16.1, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. This just follows up our discussion at a recent briefing that basically requests the Chief Executive Officer to write to Regional Roads Victoria, Transport Victoria and the local member for Melton, Mr Stephen McGee, expressing concerns with Millwall residents at the delays that have plagued the roadworks on the Bacchus Marsh Geelong Road, which commenced in October 18.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Is there a second for that, please?
I'll second it.
Councillor Dudzik, any dissent? Councillor Tatchell? Councillor Ward, there's an opposition. Could you wish to lead the debate on this item, please?
Yeah, well, I guess that these roadworks started in October 18, and I think we've been fortunate that due to COVID there's been reduced traffic because people have been forced to work from home. But now that we're opening back up from COVID, in addition to freight, this road connects over 5,900 vehicles per day with the towns of Lara, Bacchus Marsh and Geelong. And after 4 years of being patient with these roadworks, I know that many ratepayers and road users are extremely frustrated and have expressed their frustration to me and have asked us to express that frustration to Regional Roads Victoria, Transport Victoria and the State Government.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Dudzik, second. Do you wish to speak, please?
This particular stretch of road, there's been a lot of accidents on this stretch of road over many years, and it was called for by the community for this road to be improved. It's not really acceptable that it's taken this long, and for people that actually run a business, it's costing people money, the delays on this road. The length of time that it takes people to get to Geelong and back to transport goods or even to deliver a service, it's unacceptable. It is adding costs to businesses.
Thank you. Councillor Tatchell, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Interesting comment, I suppose. Interesting that I'm objecting in consideration that I run a fleet of over 60 vehicles, so I suppose I use that road fairly regularly myself, but it isn't about me. The reality is every time we put a complaint in about a road that's not ours, it becomes the concern to the minister or to the member. When we've got 1,800 kilometres of goat track that litters the Shire, where every day our residents complain about the condition of our roads that if you spent $10 billion tomorrow, you'd only be able to fix half of them. They were designed for horse and carts. Today they carry vehicles from all over the state at 72.5 tonne under mass management, single lane, made with bases that were set up for 12 tonne that are now carrying 72.5. We can't keep up with the maintenance on our roads on a shire this big with the poor population. Every time this is the third time we've written a letter to either minister or the local member about roads that aren't ours. And now I know that if we write a secondary letter about a road that is ours, he'll go, which one is your concern? Our role, we need to know our role. Our role is to represent the people of Mirrabul and the 1,800 kilometres of goat track that we're failing on, you know, because there isn't enough money to do it. The 26 cents a litre that comes out of every fuel bowser is not fairly distributed. The application of our road network is abused by the rest of Victoria as it funnels into our hub, where we pick up the tab for it. So, you know, this continually writing letters about roads that aren't ours and not writing letters about roads that are, when we've got, we put in for a meeting with the federal government in terms of getting some funding for our roads, the roads that are critical and need support, and the minister won't even meet with us, the current minister. So, I mean, imagine if we start writing letters to her about roads that aren't ours. So the reality of this is, I understand where Rod's coming from, and no one uses the roads more than I do. I use 30,000 litres a week, on a good week. So, and I lose 2 hours a day on every bad road in Victoria. But it's not about me, it's about our responsibility to the residents, to the country roads, the goat tracks that they've been forced to live with, the lack of infrastructure put into country roads when they know that we're being funnelled by the distribution of vehicles from all over Victoria that always find all roads lead to Rome, all roads lead, everything comes through here, and you only got to look around the bitumen and the gravel and the damage that's been done during these 2 wet seasons to see why the people in Moorabool are very upset. So by all means write them a letter, but let's talk about the real issue here. Our roads, not theirs, they can fail as much as they like. But our roads, they're our responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Ward, you wish to close the debate, please?
Yeah, look, I suppose I'm more than happy to support Mr Tatchell and obviously advocate to the Minister for Local Roads. I don't want to create an impression where that is not as equally important to me. What I am saying is that the ratepayers of residents, whilst the Bacchus Marsh Geelong Road is not our responsibility, a large proportion of our residents use that road on a daily basis, and after 4 years they are increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress and the slowness of the works taking place. So I don't see that well, I do see it as our role to advocate for our residents and us Regional Roads Victoria, Transport Victoria, and our local state member to please explain why these works have been delayed and to do everything in their power to get them finished.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor, the debate is now finished. I will put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, thank you. The motion's carried. Just a write to the Minister. Item 16.2, notice of motion, mountain bike jump park, Telford Park. Councillor Ward, you're also sponsoring this item, please. You wish to move that?
Yeah, I do, Mr Mayor. This is a simple one. A number of local kids over the last 2 or 3 years have built a series of bike jumps and have created a mini BMX park through there. I know we have got a full-time BMX park out in Racecourse Reserve, but the kids have built what is, I suppose, the beginners of a jump park through there. I know our ultimate plan in one of the later stages is hopefully to create a mountain bike track and park up from Bald Hill. But kids need an area to learn on, and I suppose I use Black Hill as example in Ballarat. There's a fantastic mountain bike track there, but and also as there is at the Yuyangs. But both areas also have a very, very simple introductory park. So I think it'd be fantastic if the Chief Executive Officer could look into the cost of introducing an introductory mountain bike BMX park in Telford Park in Daly. I think personally, knowing what works are already there, having walked through there, it would only be a couple of days' work for someone with a backhoe, and it would come at minimal cost. So I would like the Chief Executive Officer to look at that. So I think it'd be very popular with the Daly youth because they're already doing it and they're already building it themselves.
Okay, thank you. I got ahead of myself. I should have had a second before you actually lead on to that.
I'm happy to second.
Okay, you've already had that opportunity to speak to a Councillor Ward, so I'll ask Councillor, is there any opposition to this?
I don't have an opposition,
yes,
but I have a question for the
please.
officers. Is that okay?
Yes, question for Councillor Berry.
Thank you. We've got the BMX track currently at the Bacchus Marsh Racecourse Recreation Reserve. Will the proposed bike jump park at Telford Park that Councillor Ward's putting through have a detrimental effect on the unfinished BMX bike track as it is now?
Mr CEO, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor. I suppose, first of all, I wasn't aware it was unfinished. I think from our point of view, we committed to what we've done, and that's the BMX track there. Second of all, it's an unknown quantity. We wouldn't be able to say whether it would have any impact on it whatsoever. We wouldn't know that. That would be impossible to tell.
Can I have a
with permission, permission.
Sorry.
Point of order, please?
Yes, Councillor Berry had a question there. I'll supplement your question, Councillor Ward. If you could just wait for a second, Councillor Berry, please.
So would future funding affect the track out at Bacchus Marsh, do you think? Because if we put another one?
Through you, that would be a decision of council, because any funding request for either project would be directed through council as part of the budget process. So it would be considered as part of the budget process. But I would imagine as there is a finite sum of money, I would imagine different projects would get different priorities when council is making its decision on the budget.
Councillor Ward, then Councillor Dudzik. Councillor Ward, you have a question there, please, or a comment?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't being rude. I was actually trying to answer Maura's question, because I do have some knowledge.
Councillor Berry, please. Yeah.
Councillor Berry, sorry, yes, I do have some knowledge of it. The BMX track that is out at Racecourse Reserve is an advanced BMX track, and my son, for example, and his friends have raced mountain bikes for many years, and they would be barely confident of riding that BMX track. This is quite simply an introductory track for younger kids to learn to ride bikes over mounds. It's probably a small step above what we have at Darley Park. And I know that we were involved at Darley Park and we built that for less than $10,000. I think what we could build at Telford Park would be a small step above what is Darley Park, and it would be a lovely introductory park that could be achieved at minimal cost, and that's why I'm asking the CEO to look at the cost.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Dudley, you have a question, please?
I wanted to speak to the item because I seconded it.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, but I thought there might have been a question there. Councillor Dudzik, please. A seconder, just speak to the matter, please.
This is a request for a report. It's to scope out a project, see how much it's going to cost. It will be beneficial for youth. It sounds like a great option for that park, and it's worth looking into, and that's really our job, to look into what the possibilities are and explore if that's what we want to do.
Okay, thank you. Is there any opposition? Councillor Tatchell. Sorry, I got befuddled. Yeah, Councillor Tatchell, please.
I really don't want to debate this. I mean, but we are bombarded with BMX at the moment. And I agree with what Councillor Ward is saying. My issue is that we can't just continue to get reports on projects and continue to stack those reports up on top of each other. We're already struggling to do the reports that we're already asking for. We've already got projects that are unfinished that we're trying to get finished. We also, and we've been through the process today where we've looked at all of these items that we keep dumping on the officers and saying, by the way, just write us another report, we'll fund that up. And what concerns me is when all these things end up in the drawer, and a lot of them gather dust for a number of years, as you know, Mr Mayor, we've been doing this for a while. The problem is that all of a sudden you may get an election or a local member that'll come along and say, I particularly like to fund that. And it could be a project that's been there 3 minutes where people have been advocating for 10 or 15 years for another project that goes back in the drawer. And I think you get to the point, and I don't know how many projects we've done reports on or how many we've got sitting in drawers, but there must be a lot of them, because in the time I've been here, I reckon there's been hundreds and hundreds of these great ideas that all of a sudden become priorities. And I think we've seen a very similar thing with Ball Hill, where, you know, someone has a thought bubble and then all of a sudden the minister likes the idea. And sure, it's a great thing, but how many other projects got put on the back burner because the minister or the local member liked it? And I could say the same for the Bland Library. I mean, it got pushed forward. Yeah, it's a great idea, but is that fair to people that have been working hard to get their projects through? And look, I agree with Councillor Ward that these BMX things need these places to go and they're wonderful things. But at the end of the day, there has to be a point where you can't just keep biting off more than you can chew and then chewing like buggery. Something inevitably will have to give. So, look, whilst I applaud the project, I just think, can we finish a few of these other things first and then maybe bring it back up again later? And I'd happily support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Ward, just to close the debate now, please.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'd like to speak against it.
Sorry, Councillor Edwards, yes, you speak, please.
Yeah, I just want to speak against it, and a very similar vein to what Councillor Thatcher had to say. I'm not against the use of Telford Park for a potential miniature BMX, mountain bike, whatever you want to call it, but we actually have master plans for these areas which go through significant public consultation. So whilst I think there's merit in the idea, I would like it to see it go through the formal process, and there's every opportunity that councillors then can influence that outcome if that's what the community feedback is. I have no doubt that that old 1,000 steps, the mountain biking, Telford Park is a great opportunity, but to get it right, we need to go through a full master plan process, and then we can fund it accordingly. I know this is only for a report, but reports generally lead to the next step. And what we need to do is be very careful that we're not putting in jeopardy many other projects that are on the go or utilising resources. Let it go through the process of community consultation through a master plan update, and then that's how we should achieve this outcome. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Minari, you have...
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have one quick question just in regards to what Councillor Edwards said. So do we have a master plan for that exact area of Telford Park?
Mr CEO, please.
I'm just, through you, Mr Mayor, I'm just looking at either Phil or Sally I'm not exactly 100% sure on Telford Park.
Mr Jeffrey, please, you're able to respond to that.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there is an old master plan at that site. We've just recently gone through an engagement process for the accessibility trail on at Telford Park as part of the funding we received recently. That consultation didn't include the option of a BMX or mountain bike area.
Okay, thank you, Mr Jeffrey. Councillor Minari, please.
Is that okay? So the area that he has scribbled in red on the map, you don't have... Sorry to put you on the spot. What in the master plan that was designed, what was proposed for that area?
Mr Jeffrey, able to respond to that?
Sorry.
Take it on notice.
Mr Mayor, I'd have to take that on notice. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ward.
Sorry.
Councillor Thatcher, a question?
Yeah, sorry, it may not be a relevant question either, Mr Mayor. I'm a little confused here. So are we saying that in Telford Park there was already a mention of the BMX track being an option in Telford Park prior to Councillor Ward's motion, or no? Sorry.
Jeffrey, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor. No, for clarity, we didn't form part of our engagement process, but there is an existing informal one that kids have built there themselves on the site presently.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor Tatchell?
Oh, Mr Mayor, I'm not sure, because it probably does change things somewhat, because we already have something existing, whether it be formal or informal. And the question that Councillor Ward is pulling is he wants a report to have that formalised, which is a completely different thing to creating a project if there's something that's already in existence. So on that basis, I'll withdraw my objection. Based on I didn't have that information. So.
Okay. Councillor Ward, you wish to wrap up the debate?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm sorry if I didn't make it clear earlier. I've been walking through that area for the last 2 or 3 years as the kids have been building it, because my son was one of the ones who started building it, and I've seen the work the kids have done. So that's why I believe a report is worthwhile, because I think it will take very little work by council at very minimal cost, and that's what I'm asking the CEO to look at, to turn what is an informal jump park into something a little bit probably safer and a little bit more organised, and that would give local kids a lot of enjoyment. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Tad, you have a question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. It probably just occurred to me that if we're running an informal jump park on, I assume this is council land.
Yes.
Are we insured for that? Like if somebody, because obviously it's not taking just a walking track. If we're jumping bicycles over jumps on council land on an informal jumps that haven't been accredited or approved, are we responsible for those? If there's
Mr. Zia, you wish to comment on the alleged transgressions?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. I'll go back to your previous question because I don't think that was answered the way you wanted it. I think your question was, did the original plan for Telford Park include a BMX track, as in the master plan the old master plan, which we will go and check, but it's highly unlikely that that is the case, is what I would say, but I don't want 100% to say that, but it would be highly unlikely that the master plan that was originally done for Telford Park that would include a BMX track there. Second question is they are illegal works that have been done. If those kids have created a BMX track there, they would be illegal works that would be done. Would we be liable? Now that we're very much aware of it, we would be.
Councillor Tatchell.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I used to be indecisive, now I'm not sure. I'll put my objection back to it on that basis, because it's obviously not official.
We haven't voted yet, so Councillor Minari, you have a question there. And sorry, Councillor Dudley. Yeah, Councillor Minari first. Sorry.
Thank you. So I'm also clarifying the master plan, the old master plan. And what I know of that is if, for example, the old master plan does get chosen for funding in the future, wouldn't it go to community consultation and then be reworked anyway? And then obviously what we're seeing here is maybe the community may say we want a bike track, and then it would just implement through the community consultation. Am I correct?
Mr. CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly correct. It is an old master plan, and in addition, with the funding that we've got for Bald Hill, those paths and that wouldn't have been part of that original master plan. So it is a master plan that will need to be refreshed and will involve community consultation as part of that.
Councillor Dudzik, then Councillor Berry, and please, if we could not reopen the debate, just sort of stick with questions, please.
My recollection of when the Bald Hill project was first created and discussed amongst us, I do actually recall there being discussion of a BMX track. It's not actually news to me. It was discussed in conversations. Whether it's in formal documentation, I don't know, but it was certainly part of the big dream that was originally put forward. It has definitely been discussed, and I would just suggest that what Councillor Ward is proposing is that it gets documented. Well,
need a question.
Can you check that the documentation that has been presented to councillors previously, whether or not that was in it? Because my recollection was it was.
I indicated previously we're happy to do that. Our feeling at this moment is that the documentation is unlikely to have a skate park there because of the time period elapsed since that particular plan was done. But I don't know what discussions were had.
More Ball Park than Telford Park.
Council, it's got to be a question. The debate is closed. I hate to bring that up, but be tough.
Could I have a question, Mr. Mayor?
Well, Councillor Berry and then Councillor Edwards. Councillor Berry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This map that's on the agenda with the red squigglies, opposite, is there houses in there? Does any of the officers know? Across the road? Is this an old map?
Someone able to respond to that? I think you're right, but someone able to respond to that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, a subdivision is under construction in that location at the moment.
Quite large, quite filled in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, question, please.
Yeah, just a quick one, Mr Mayor. In relation to our rolling master plan review, which we are ongoing in our council plan, do we know when Telford Park is due to be revisited?
Someone like to respond to that, or have to take it on notice?
You, Mr Mayor. I think we'll have to take that one on notice. I'm just looking at the officers to see if I can get a response, and I'm sure.
Okay, councillors, enough. We have a mover and a seconder. If we just thrash this around a bit, so I'll put that. All those in favour? All those against? It is lost. Thank you. Item 17, rescission, notice of rescission, nil. Item 18, Mayor's report, that has been circulated, councillors, so I would proffer that as my activities in the last little while. So if somebody prepared to move that, Councillor Minari, Councillor Tatchell, put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Councillor reports. Councillor Minari, any councillor report, please?
Nothing to report, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tatchell, any report? Councillor report, please? No, nothing. Thank you. Councillor Ward, any councillor reports, please?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, any councillor report, please?
No, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Berry, any councillor reports?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I attended with the peri-urban group of councils and the CEO Wednesday, March 9th, Friday, March 11th, online or face-to-face meetings advocating for various ministers and shadow ministers, state and federal, advocating for the transport issues, connectivity issues, job-creating tourism assets and placemaking for civic and cultural infrastructure throughout those periods. And it seems like all peri-urban councils have the same issues that ours does, so we're all on the same track. I managed to sneak in the conversation around our indoor pool plight a couple of times. Got a couple of laughs for a Olympic pool, but in any case, I snuck it in. On Friday, the 18th of March, I attended the VLGA Fast Track 2022 Councillor Leadership Development Program. It was a great day with some excellent guest speakers, particularly the agenda item on behavioural discussions in LGAs. Hoping that is to be continued. It was very interesting. Thursday, 24th of March, in the evening, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, I went online and attended the VLGA and LGIU Global Live Panel Forum on local government reform. It was interesting via Zoom, listening to an Irish local government area in Limerick, an English one in Buckinghamshire, and New Zealand councils on their perspectives around local government reform they have experienced and been dealing with. I attended the Harvest Festival held at Bacchus Marsh Racecourse Reserve on Sunday the 20th of March. It was a great day, well organised and well supported. It was good to see the RSL members collecting gold coins on the gate to raise funds going towards their Resting Poppy Sculptor fundraising. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Dudgeck, any reports, please?
I attended the Bacchus Marsh Public Hall Committee meeting this Monday, and that was my first outing for the month because I've had COVID and been locked in for 3 weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Dudgeck. We wish you well in your recovery. Somebody move that the council reports be received, please. Councillor Minari seconded. Councillor Berry, all those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Next item is urgent business. There has been 3 items. Sorry. Councillor Minari, any urgent business, please?
No, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Tatchell, any urgent business, please?
I wouldn't dare, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Edwards, any urgent business, please? You're on mute at the moment, Councillor Edwards, please. If you could just...
Yes, I did, Mr Mayor. I had one item that I circulated to all councillors earlier today.
Yes, just in regards to the Bacchus Marsh Eastern Link project. Is that correct, Councillor Edwards?
Yes, it is, Mr Mayor.
So
yes, it is. It's in relation to the Eastern Link project.
So you're moving that this matter be actually come forward as urgent business? So
yes, I am, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Tatchell. This is in regard to the acceptance of this notice of motion, so I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Councillor Edwards, now your motion, please.
Yeah, so Mr Mayor, just a bit of a preamble. So as everybody's aware, the eastern bypass options have been sitting with Vic Roads for a long road. The community have given significant feedback that why wasn't Woolpack Road considered? And I have given a copy to the CEO, and I apologise because my computer died, so I'm now on my phone and I don't actually have the actual wording. If Mr CEO or one of the other councillors is able to read that out, Mr Burles and how to put it together. I think it's an important issue, and considering the time frames that Vic Roads are given, I think it is urgent business that we write to the relevant ministers to ask why Woolpack Road was not considered as a viable option. I think the community has a right to know why it was not considered and why they weren't taking all information in when they developed their final three options.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I'll get the Mr CEO to read out the motion that you circulated, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Edwards' motion is that Council request the Chief Executive to write to the relevant Minister and seek an urgent meeting to A. Seek clarification on why the Woolpack Road option was not shortlisted for the Backers Marsh East Link Road project, and clarify the implications to traffic improvements and land acquisitions in excluding the Woolpack Road as a shortlisted option.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Tatchell. Any opposition? Sorry? No, we have a...
I will. I'm opposing.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, sorry. So, Councillor Edwards, there's opposition. Do you wish to speak to your item, please?
Yeah, so I'll keep it very simple, Mr Mayor. I think the community has a right to have all options explored. I'm not saying that the Woolpack Road is the best option, but if it's not been explored and we get a second-rate option that costs too much money, it will never get built, and we won't be able to grow the Parwin precinct. We won't be able to do a lot of that work if we don't have a proper analysis done that will give a viable option.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Tatchell, second, do you wish to speak to the matter, please?
I'll keep it short too, Mr Mayor. I think I had a lot less snow on my roof when we first discussed Woolpack Road. It's been an ongoing issue for a number of years. Like we're heading into our second decade. I'm absolutely amazed that it still doesn't rate as an option in the discussion in trying to rectify the horrendous traffic conditions in Bacchus Marsh. So I fully support where Councillor Edwards is. I think sometimes politics gets in the front of common sense in these problems, and I think if you ask the average person in the street today, should it be included, I think there's been a complete change of mood in terms of Woolpack Road based on what's happening there today. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Councillor Dudzik, you wish to oppose the motion?
I would say that Woolpack Road has been considered. We've read detailed reports on it over the years, where there's been exhaustive conversation about Woolpack Road over the years, and the answer is quite clear. The reason that it's not being considered is due to the heritage status listing, to do it would actually be a breach of the heritage status listing. So to me, it's an obvious answer why it's not being considered.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Any other speakers for or against the motion?
Can I have
Councillor
a question?
Berry?
Sorry, can I have
question?
a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, the question is, so prior councillors would know, so it was never discussed, the option to go through Woolpack Road?
Yeah. No, but, sorry, it was discussed.
Not in this last reiteration, Mr Mayor.
I'm going. My memory is a little bit longer than yours, Councillor. I'm going back to a couple of councillors.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Berry? Yes. Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Thatcher's hankering to press the speak button.
I was just going to mention that I think it first came up at Common Count, your first meeting, was it?
Indeed. Okay, Councillor Ward, you speak for or against it, please, or question?
Yeah, no, I'm certainly speaking strongly in favour of it. I share Councillor Edwards' view. The feedback from the residents in Bacchus Marsh, it's just a growing crescendo of why it hasn't been considered. many of the reasons why it was excluded earlier are no longer relevant. Some of the trees that were considered heritage listed and may have been removed as a result of any roadworks are no longer there. The trees have a finite life and many of the trees have been damaged in recent storms. So I think there's an opportunity now to relook at that option and in doing so pay homage to our returned soldiers in a fitting way as well, so we can meet the needs of the residents and satisfy the needs and pay due respect to those returned soldiers.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Edwards, you wish to close the debate, please?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Mayor, and I want to reiterate that I'm not saying it is the best option. What I'm saying is that the community deserve the right to have it to be considered, because if we do get a second-rate option, if we get one that goes through the middle of a brand new development, which is one of the options being considered, the reality is if we put, here we have Merrimew, the future growth of Bacchus Marsh, and one of the options is to put a truck route right through the middle of it. Here we go, we're just creating a Grant Street in 20 years' time. I do not see any good options that are going to be used by the trucks. And we've got to remember, the trucks, we want the trucks out of the main street of Bacchus Marsh. And if we put a bypass that's miles out of their way, they won't use it. So we need Vic Roads or Regional Roads Victoria to consider all options and put the best option forward. And if you haven't considered all options, then you're not necessarily putting the best option forward. And to date, we've been given no viable reason why it wasn't included in the study. Right? Remembering that back in Councillor Sullivan's term 3 councils ago, it was considered the primary option and it was not considered in this study. And I find that poor, very poor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillors, the debate is now closed. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It is carried. Thank you. Councillor Ward, any urgent business, please?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Berry, any urgent business, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have two.
Yes.
Please. The first one, I've been attending a plethora of meetings with individual club members at Bacchus Marsh Racecourse Recreation Reserve, including the Bacchus Marsh Racecourse Recreation Reserve Advisory Committee meetings. It is very clear that funding has been understated re Stage 1 of Bacchus Marsh Racecourse Recreation Reserve. Stage 1 is still not completed and clubs in particular, the Bacchus Marsh Pony Club, the Camp Drafters Club, the BM Poultry Club and the BMX Bike Club continue to raise issues on their playing fields. Some of these clubs compete at state and national levels and attract elite competitors to their events. When Stage 1 first commenced construction, Council had a budget to work to. It is not now reasonable to expect Council to work to this budget and particularly compromise quality construction at the reserve. Costs have now increased and continue to get out of control in respect of when Stage 1 first commenced. It also needs to be mentioned that COVID-19 has played a role in rising costs and will continue to do so. Council are building a state-of-the-art facility for residents and we need to get the whole Bacchus Marsh Racecourse Recreation Reserve in respect of Stage 1 representing quality as a priority.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Probably sort of led into the actual presentation that just you're moving that this
Yes.
matter be accepted in urgent business. So
Yes,
is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Tatchell. Now, Councillor, I think you've sort of covered a lot of it anyway. Do you wish to speak to that,
That's
Councillor?
right. Do you want me to read it again?
Oh, well, just a synopsis.
I actually object, Mr. Mayor.
Beg your pardon?
I actually object to it being in urgent business.
Well, it's up to Council whether they accept it, so I'm in Council's hands. If Council doesn't want to accept it, that's something the Council will have to decide upon. So, sorry, Councillor Dudzik, please.
Are we able to say that we want to report at the next council meeting? I thought we weren't allowed to tell people when they do the reports because they have workloads.
No, well, you're not able to...
It says the next council meeting.
The motion doesn't say that, does it?
Yeah, that's just an...
It's the motion.
No.
The preamble is not the motion. So I hear what Councillor Edwards has made a point of order, but...
So you've had a move, no, Mr Mayor, you've had a mover and a seconder
Yes.
that we be accepted. I'm just saying I object to it being accepted.
No, sorry, I thought... No, that's okay. Well, okay, then we'll put that. All those in... Sorry, Councillor Minari?
Thank you. Just a question, if I could,
Certainly.
to Councillor Berry.
Yes.
Councillor Berry, when did you attend the meetings?
I have attended 3 meetings to date, and I've also spoken to several of the clubs on several occasions.
Sorry, recently or?
Yes.
Recently.
Yes.
Like in the last?
Recently and going back 2 months, I'd say.
Thank you.
Councillor, you have a question, Councillor Ward, or you wish to make a comment or speak?
Yeah, look, I suppose I'm interested in understanding why Councillor Edwards has objected.
Yeah. So my reason for objecting is for that exact reason, that we've had a number of meetings, and I don't see a problem necessarily with the motion, but urgent business should be for those things that can't be heard before the next meeting, because what it does, it takes away the opportunity for people to, you know, for example, the Racecourse Reserve members might want to talk to an item. So if Councillor would like to put that as a motion in the next meeting, it gives people an opportunity to talk to it.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Tatchell has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I suppose the question is that we're in the middle of defining our next budget. So in terms of urgent business, I would have thought that, based on the information that's been circulated, that there may or may not be a considerable shortfall in the funding of this particular project. It would be better to get this that information prior to the budget being accepted, on the basis that we may not be able to complete stage 1, or it could. We don't know what that report's going to say. I don't want to preempt it, but if, for example, it came back and there wasn't enough funding to complete stage 1, we would not be in a position to change that, where we'd have to put an amendment in to the budget to provide that extra funding, or at least consider that extra funding. So from that perspective, I do see it as relatively urgent, because we're already in those budget discussions. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Minari, please.
Sorry, just another quick question.
Yeah, certainly.
If it were to be accepted and we compile a report, would the groups be consulted before that report is finished, written?
I'm assuming that would be the officers' prerogative, how they would deal with the motion as stands. Point 1 and 2 are there. And at the moment, we're only deciding whether council accepts this, so I have to get past that threshold first. So, Mr CEO, you wish to respond to that?
Through you, Mr Mayor. With stage 1, one of the complexities with stage 1 is this definition that different people hang on to, which is around no disadvantage, and similar. We will receive similar. That has no bearing. It doesn't mean anything to a large extent. So I think some of the issue is around people's expectations weren't managed as well as they could have been as to what they were actually going to get. And there are some other issues on that side. But I suppose from our point of view, it is early, and we're working through exactly what's required to finish our commitment to what we said we would do with stage 1. That's very different to what people might be expecting.
Thank you. Councillor Ward, then Councillor Tatchell. Councillor Ward, please.
Yeah, look, I'm sorry, but I'm just checking my emails. Is this notice of urgent business been distributed? Because I haven't got it.
It was circulated just before the meeting. I've got a copy. I have a copy. Councillor Berry, you wish to?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, apologies, Rod. I did circulate it here. I did this at home this afternoon, and actually when printed it out, it dropped off my system, so I couldn't email it. I had 2 copies here for yourself and for David. No,
that's okay. That's
exactly
okay.
what I read out is what's on there, also with an attached motion. But
no, that's okay. That's okay. I was just checking Peter's email.
Sorry, Councillor Tatchell, then Councillor Edwards, I believe.
Yeah, thanks. I'll make it a question, a simple question really, I suppose. So the question would be through the Mayor to the CEO that on the basis that of what the CEO has just said about the actual project itself and understanding that there has been a lot of changes in terms of the scope of the project, and all that's been forced by ministers where we've had to go off in different directions. There is obviously a distinct need. So my question to the CEO through the Mayor would be that would it be prudent to, in terms of the budget, to actually have a clear understanding now in terms of urgency to understand if there is a shortfall for those reasons, which are not the reasons of the people running the project, for all those other reasons, that would it be better to do it as an urgent business to give the staff an opportunity to re-look at the budget to try and understand what we need to do to make it easier, or not easier, but more successful for this project to go through and make sure that it's well budgeted for so that stage one can be completed.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Councillors, I need to go backwards before we go forward. We actually deal now with the acceptance of this motion. So could we're actually getting into the substantive part. Councillor Dudzik. Is there a question here, please?
I have a bit of a concern about the wording of this motion because I think that we should be wanting a more general report because this motion gives the implication that we will deliver everything that every club wants, and that may not necessarily match up with what council wants to do. So I think a more general update report would be appropriate rather than saying a report addressing all the needs.
Councillors, could I remind you, this is to whether we accept the motion. We're actually getting into the debate.
Well, then I'll say no, not as it is.
Okay, so you're opposing it.
Yeah.
We have to be unanimous, don't we?
I believe it has to be unanimous, Mr Mayor. Yeah.
Councillor Dudzik has noted opposition, so as a result of that, this matter cannot be considered tonight. And I would suggest that perhaps Councillor Berry may wish to reframe it as something into another meeting in another forum or something like that, but at the moment it can't be considered. Now, that having been said, urgent business. Oh, Councillor Tatchell, sorry.
On that basis, Mr Mayor, would it be prudent to maybe a notice of motion be put forward at the next council meeting, maybe with a briefing from the CEO to the councillor to get the wording
No, I think that would be a reasonable proposition. I think that's Mr. CEO.
True. We're happy. I mean, the standard process is if a project needs additional funds, is that we would come back to council and ask for those funds. Now, if the scope changes, that's different. But our view at this moment in time is we have the funds to deliver what we said we were going to deliver. What is different is that there's a gap between the expectations, and that's where the scope could change. So I think from our point of view, we're happy to bring back a report to council showing what we're actually going to do to finish out stage one, and the costings that we anticipate will be associated with closing out of stage one.
Thank you. Councillor Berry, you have a question there, please?
Yes, I'm happy with a report coming back. Thank you.
Well, I think it'll be, I think what's been suggested that if you frame a motion for a notice of motion for the next council meeting.
Yes.
Is that all right?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we'll start working on that anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Dudzik, then Councillor Tatchell.
Asking me if she's got one more motion.
Yeah, no, you're to light on. You're asking a question.
I've given up on that.
No, you've got to follow the bouncing ball. Councillor Tatchell, please.
I just want to clarify, Mr Mayor, through a question to make sure that the reasoning why the report would come forward earlier is purely because of the budget constraints. I assume that's, if we waited another 60 days, we'd be that close to our cut-off. So,
Mr CEO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a report that we're doing anyway. I mean, we're reviewing all of our budgets going into the year end. I think what you will find is it's actually got to do with the scope of what's expected versus what we're actually delivering. So we'll be quite clear on what we're delivering to close out the scope.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Moving on, Councillor Berry, you have another matter of urgent business, I understand? If you could just sort of give a bit of an outline what it is and just what it's about, so to see whether it's accepted first, please.
Okay. The outline is about the Equine Club at Bacchus Marsh Racecourse Reserve and applying to the Commonwealth Games Committee for a request on an update on the possibility of having a training facility at the Equine Centre at the Bacchus Marsh Recreation Reserve.
And this is for the Commonwealth Games?
Commonwealth Games,
okay.
Yes.
Councillors, someone second that, please. If second, Councillor Tatchell. I'll put that. All those in favour. I hope councillors who are online have heard that. All those in favour? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Now, Councillor Berry, you wish to state your motion, please?
Yeah, the motion that Council write a report on the Equine Club at Bacchus Marsh Racecourse Recreation Reserve to bring up the facility to a standard that the Commonwealth Games Committee would expect as a training facility before and during the Games proposed for Melbourne in 2026. And 2, write a letter to the Commonwealth Games Committee to show an expression of interest in opening up the Equine Club at the Bacchus Marsh Racecourse Recreation Reserve as a training facility before and during the Games proposed for Melbourne in 2026, and to be included in writing that letter that we apply for funding for this project.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. A seconder for that, please. Councillor Tatchell. Any opposition? Sorry, Mr. CEO.
Through the chair, I think before we would write any letter, we would need to get permission of the club itself, because they would have a user agreement with us as well.
Sorry, I had. Do you have to get written permission? Because I did get verbal that they would be pleased to entertain that.
True. It would be a formality, I'd imagine, but I think from our point of view, we would need it in writing, and then we would be in a position to proceed.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that.
So basically the motion stands and that's just a given that would have to occur. Is that the way forward here?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Does Council Dudzik any urgent business, please?
Well, I didn't, but I'd now like to put forward a motion that council officers provide a general update report on the Bacchus Marsh Recreation Reserve project scope and budget shortfalls.
That's when you say that's is a racecourse reserve you're referring to?
Yeah.
Is there a seconder for that, please?
I have a question.
It's a general report.
Sorry, Councillor Ward, you have a question, please?
Yeah, I actually, and I'm just asking for clarity, Mr. Mayor. Didn't we agree that that's what the CEO was going to do and provide at the next meeting after Councillor Berry raised this earlier?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that was basically the commitment I gave, is that we would do it.
Okay, Councillor Tatchell.
With respect to Mr. Mayor, we knocked back the urgency of the actual request and then to put it up again when we've already had a resolution. I think that would create all sorts of problems.
It was the wording.
Well, I guess the question is, we have a mover by Councillor Dudzik.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay, you withdraw that?
That's fine. But I had an issue with the wording because it gives the opinion that we would give the clubs every single thing that they wanted, whereas I thought a general report was more appropriate.
Please, the matter before us is whether this urgent business is accepted. So let's do one step at a time. And obviously, Councillor Dudzik has withdrawn that. Is that correct?
Yep, that's fine.
And I'd like to remind urgent business. I'll read what it says for everyone's edification. Urgent business means business that because of its urgency cannot be reasonably listed in the agenda for the next meeting. So maybe we should have that written up across the top of the chamber. So thank you, councillors. No other urgent business? Thank you.
Well, you want to give them...
Well, I declare the meeting
everything they
closed.
want.
Thank you, councillors, for your participation and involvement here tonight. It was quite rigorous and always good debate. Thank you, officers, for your presentation tonight. It's been great.